How's it going, guys? My name's Shane. Welcome back to the Horror Basement and another installment of the classic horror review series. Today we're going to be talking about Fritz Lang's Metropolis from 1927. And now, just a brief plot synopsis before I give you my thoughts on this movie. Um, this takes place in the city of Metropolis in the far-flung future of the year 2000, where the city is divided into two separate halves. The lower underground half is the living quarters and the working space of the workers, who are the lower class, who have to live and work essentially underground um, to provide like electricity and power for the city above, where all the rich people live. So our main character's name is Freder, or Fredders. I just called him Fred in my notes. And of course, he is one of the rich people, being that he's the main character. And his life's going great. He's playing around in some garden up in his mansion, and his father, John Frederson, is actually the master of Metropolis. So I'm not sure if he's like just the mayor or he owns the place or what's going on. But he's playing around, chasing some girl around a fountain until some dirty worker class people kind of barge in, and they both just awkwardly stare at each other. And the workers, essentially, it's just Maria, who is going to be Fred's love interest, and a bunch of like worker children, and she's telling them to look upon the opulence of uh, our brothers, and this is what we work for. And of course, as is often the case in these old stories or old type of movies, Freder immediately falls madly in love with Maria and just has to go down into the gullet of the city to see her and concoct some plan for them to be together. So the first time he goes down, he goes to the main power plant area where there are a bunch of workers on this kind of turning knobs and pulling levers on this big wall of machinery, and they're moving back and forth to keep the city's power going. And there, it's hot and there's steam rolling around, and these people are getting worked to the point where they like either they pass out or drop dead or whatever. And Fred like hallucinates that this is not a power plant, but this is some kind of temple to the demon god Moloch, and the workers are just getting like fed in to this like the gaping maw of this beast, which I think is intentional on the director's part, and it's kind of an allegory for the type of toll this type of work or toil takes on not only people's bodies but their spirits. Um, so Fred, that is, goes back up to and talks to his father and says like we need to do something about the workers and their state, because this is like unacceptable. This is insane. Like people are being worked to the point of where they're collapsing, and John, his father, basically tells him to buzz off and that he shouldn't be interfering in John's work of keeping the city running. So, for this reason, Fred decides to go back down and actually switch places with one of the workers. Like, they change clothes, so Fred is now wearing, like, the black or gray tunic and cap of the workers, and presumably there's some worker guy gallivanting around in Fred's fancy white, like, summer clothes, having a grand old time with his newfound status in life. But after actually getting a taste of the work, I think he yells out something to the effect of, like, Father, I never realized 10 hours could be so long or do so much to me. So basically, this was before we had an 8-hour workday, so Fred put in like 10 hours of labor for the first time in his life, and he's feeling it. But after that, him and all the other workers go down into the caves, even further down below the underground workstation or whatever. And of course, there's Maria, and she's giving she's doing like Bible story time. She's up on stage, and all the workers are kind of sitting around, and she tells them the story of the Tower of Babel. And at this point, Maria is preaching, peace and that kind of thing, like basically urging the workers not to rise up or revolt against the masters or the rich people. They're saying, you work hard and do your time, and you'll get rewarded essentially in the next life, or something to that effect. But for the most part, she's preaching a message of like peace and cooperation as much as possible. And this actually is seeming to resonate well with the workers. They're very, taken by Maria. And, of course, her and Fred, meet up after the sermon story time, and they have their first little, meeting with each other, face to face. And all while this is going on, Fred's father, John, goes to visit his friend from back in the day, who is a mad scientist with a metal robotic hand named Rotwang, which I found funny. I don't know about you guys. But Rotwang is your stereotypical, crazy mad scientist. He's got the lab coat, crazy, Einstein hair, before Einstein was a thing, and he's got the robotic hand. And he shows John his newest creation, which is a robot that he says will replace the worker. He's gonna create like an army of these robots and take over. They're gonna take over the work that the common people are now doing. And but John, of course, hatches a different idea when he realizes that Maria has gotten to this point of power within the workers, and he wants to essentially get them out of the way so that he can replace them with these robots. So he tells Rotwang to kidnap Maria and use some weird science technology that's not explained to make the robot look like Maria, so that robot Maria can go back down and tell all the workers to revolt against the masters, so that John and the other masters will have an excuse to use violence against the working people, and then get them out of the way so they can be replaced by machines, and presumably like the rich people in Metropolis, the upper part won't have to like pay them because they'll all be dead and replaced by robots. So at no point during this plan does John consider that his son is amongst the working people and that he'd be affected by this. But actually, when John, and of course Rotwang does go down, and him and Maria have a chase scene down in the caves, and he catches her and does the science magic bullshit to make the robot look like Maria. And the actress that plays Maria, who plays both the real Maria and robot Maria, does a really good job, because of course this is a silent movie. So a lot of the emotion and the acting has to come from the physical acting of the actors. And she plays, Maria and robot Maria entirely differently. It's kind of hard to explain, physical acting in words. But you can always tell, like, there's something just off about the way that robot Maria moves. Not that if anything, the robot Maria is actually more fluid and kind of, she's like all over the place. Whereas, the good girl, real Maria, is acting like a normal person instead of like this crazy bitch. So, for some reason, before they send down Robot Maria to cause this workers' revolution, they have her do a like striptease burlesque dance at this fancy tuxedo party that John and Rotwang are throwing. So I think they kind of wrote this in just so they could have a burlesque striptease in the movie. But I mean, it's pretty good. I guess by late 20 standards, it'd be pretty risque because she's basically just got like a sheer skirt and nipple tassels, and she's gyrating around and belly dancing, and not up to the standards of modern stripper culture, but fun nonetheless. And it comes way out of left field, so it's kind of funny when you just get this like minute to 2 minute like striptease interlude in the middle of this movie. But having and there's a line in there where this is to test whether she is like whether the robot is passable as the real Maria. So the best way they could think to like test whether this robot like sets off the uncanny valley shit in people, or if she's actually passable as a real person, is to have her do a fucking striptease. So I just found that funny. But having completed her striptease and probably scooped up all the $1 bills that a robot would have no use for, fake Maria goes back down, and just as she's finishing her speech to tell all the workers, like, we need to revolt, we need to throw off the shackles, we've waited too long, all this, Fred rather, shows up and, having figured out the plot, knows that that's the fake Maria. But of course, as he starts yelling, people recognize him. It's like, hey, that's John Fredersen, the Master's son. So they, beat the shit out of him and leave him for dead. And fake Maria and all the workers go down to the main power grid, the power plant from earlier, and start, smashing stuff. And the only one that opposes them is the foreman, the guy who's kind of the overseer of the underground workers. And he, of course, tries to explain to them that if they destroy the power plant, they're going to flood the workers' quarters, like the little neighborhood where all the workers live. It's below sea level, of course, so they're going to flood it if they destroy the power grid. But they're basically an angry mob, so nobody listens. And it's essentially up to the real Maria, who has since escaped the clutches of Dr. Rotwang, probably while he was distracted by the striptease. And, later, a beaten up Fred. It's up to them to actually go save all these children from the ensuing floodwaters, which of course they do. And now all these scenes, I'm kind of glossing over it, but it's really impressive. Like the scenes where the workers are revolting or the kids are getting saved from the flood. There are literally hundreds of extras playing these mobs of either like angry workers or screaming children, and just really the scope of the production on this is really impressive. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, of course, after the workers realize that they have flooded their own homes and are still, of course, an angry mob, they decide to go up and not only confront the rich people in the upper part of the city, but also to find Maria and kill her for being like a witch and causing them to do this. So they go up top to the rich part of the city, and they're smashing shit, and they actually do end up finding the fake Maria, the robot Maria. Now, at first, I thought they were actually going to have them do the switcheroo, where they found, excuse me, where they found the real Maria and killed her, and that would be like the sad ending of the movie where they killed the wrong one. But no, they find the fake Maria and really quickly build a big like pyre and like tie her up and burn her as a witch. And while they are doing this, Fred and Maria show up and they're like, "Hey, we saved your children. You know, everything's good. Like, please stop rioting." But Rotwang, who apparently is not giving up the goat and is pissed off because they killed his one and only robot lady, he decides to chase Maria again, and they are running around in the cathedral. And this, of course, leads to the roof where he and Freder have a big, dust-up fight, with the old school movie punches where you pull your hand back a foot behind your face and then go plow and you both fall over. So they fight for a while, and of course, Fred manages to knock Rotwang off the roof where he falls to his death, and him and Maria are reunited once again, and they kiss. So that's, one happy ending taken care of. But of course they go down to go back down to the ground level of the cathedral, where the rich people and the workers are now like intermixed. And while they're all up on the steps in front of everybody, Fred gets his father, the master of the city, and the foreman, who is now like the leader of the workers, to shake hands. So that's the second happy ending. Class and wealth disparity is class struggle is over. We're all good. We're totally going to gloss over that this was all John's idea and that he should be like strung up and burned just like the robot, and that in the carnage they destroyed half the city, that being they flooded the workers' city and also destroyed the central power grid. So everything is totally not alright, but they shook hands, so it's going to be alright, and card pops up, says the end. So overall, despite how I made it sound, the plot to this is actually pretty simple. You got a love story, you got a mad scientist and a robot, you got a riot, happy ending in the end, all great. But the thing that makes this movie stand out as a classic, not only as a horror classic, but really an instrumental to the development of science fiction as a genre as well, is just the immensity and the scope of the production. Now, a lot of the exterior shots, they used miniatures and to show kind of the gleaming Art Deco design of the city, with 20-lane highways and planes flying around in between the buildings and these giant like Art Deco type skyscrapers. It's really beautiful in like a speculative fiction kind of way, because you think of how would someone from the 20s think about 70, 80 years in the future, what their like optimistic view of the city would be, or the top part where the rich people live at least. So that's impressive, but more so on the shots where there's actually actors in the frame. They had to build these gigantic sets. Like, the main one that comes to mind is the power plant, where you have these giant steps with terraces on each side where there's multiple actors just, working in the background, and then you have the people in front of it. And just like the beautiful set design, um, and just it's impressive that even this early in film history, they were able to coordinate these hundreds of extras that are just running around and waving their arms, throwing stuff, rioting. It's really impressive, and because everyone kind of remembers the robot who is actually only on the screen for a very short time before it gets turned into fake Maria, which it stays until it gets burned at the end of the movie. Um, yeah, but really enjoyable. I'd probably say this is probably tied with Phantom of the Opera 1925 for my favorite silent film. So overall, I would give this a huge thumbs up. Definitely watch this one. And the nice thing is, since this movie is so old, it is actually on YouTube if you don't have the 50 classic horror movie set. So that's going to be it for today's video. Thank y'all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you.